Learning Objective 4 finishes our chapter with a look at how receivables are listed on the balance sheet and a little bit of analysis. Um, so it's going to be relatively quick and easy. First, here's the partial balance sheet for Deere and Company. Has anyone heard of that company? Deere and Company. They make lots of, you know, farm equipment, tractors. They make for households. They make a lot of, lawnmower equipment, etc. Right? So it's pretty big, and it is actually this green color, believe it or not, on most of their things. They have a lot of receivables. Clearly, they're waiting for a lot of dough. This is in millions, right? So that's a lot of dough, right? For Deere, a lot of dough. They have their allowance account, so they subtract out a few bucks from there. God, can't get any worse. So they have net receivables of 36 billion 832 million. So hopefully they collect it. Otherwise, they're going to go, oh dear, what happened? Managing receivables is important, for businesses. Who are you going to extend that credit to? Who are you willing to sell an account to is really critical. What's your payment period? Is it going to be a standard 30-day period? Some industries have a longer period. Some industries have a 45 or a 60-day period. How are you going to monitor collections? Are you able to evaluate how quickly you are receiving that or turning that into cash? And are you offering any discounts to accelerate payments, or sending them any threatening letters? So those are interesting things to think about when it comes to receivables. But they use simply these two financial statistics, financial ratios to monitor the receivables. The first thing they do, most important one here, is something called the accounts receivable turnover. And if you think about it, it's the number of times per year that they're going to collect their receivables. So if the typical receivable is due in 30 days, and you're looking at a year period, well, basically every month is about 30 days. So they should be collecting their receivables 12 times a year. So the accounts receivable turnover should be at least 12 times a year for most companies if they have a 30-day receivable period, right? So that's what we're going to look at. Some companies might have a slower than 12 times a year, which means they're not collecting them enough. Some companies have more than a 12 times a year turnover ratio, which means they're collecting them quite rapidly, which is good for them. It's going to be cash. You want to collect these as soon as possible because accounts receivable turns to cash. So any way you can turn those over, it's terrific. Once you know the turnover rate, you can actually assess a collection period, which is the number of days you're collecting the money. So we're going to take a look at how that's done real quick to finish this up. The accounts receivable turnover rate is simply the net credit sales that the company has divided over the average net accounts receivable. So beginning accounts receivable plus the ending accounts receivable divided by 2 will give you that average. Okay. Once they get that turnover rate, they can stick that number under 365 and figure out how many days it's taken to collect. So let's take a look here at Nike for 2014. First stop, their accounts receivable turnover rate. They have $27,799,000,000 of credit sales. And you divide that by 3.27, 3.3 billion of accounts receivable. And you get 8.5 times a year. So Nike is collecting their receivables 8.5 times a year. Well, once you know it's 8.5 times a year, if you put that underneath 365, you can see their collection period for receivables is 43 days roughly, right? Well, that's a long time to wait, I think, because normally you'd want to wait every 30 days, and here Nike is waiting every 43 days. So that's not particularly good, right? They certainly have to up their workouts here to get better at it. Well, let's compare that to Skechers, right? Skechers has a accounts receivable turnover of 9.6 times a year. Well, that's a bigger number, a faster turnaround time than Nike, because again, you want it to, the higher that number, the better it is. But when you put that number under 365, it still comes out to 38 days. They're waiting for their money, which is still a little bit sketchy to me, because you want to wait 30 days and they're waiting 8 days longer. Certainly, they're doing better than Nike, so they seem to be in a better shape um, than Nike in that regard. But still, 38 days is a ways. What about the industry? Well, this particular industry is, Skechers, Nike. Um, this is athletic wear and footwear. They're sort of they look at each other as more than just a sneaker company. They look at themselves as athletic wear, athletic gear, and stuff like that. So if you look at the industry for the same year we just looked at, their turnover was 12.2 times a year. That's exactly where it should be, right? We talked about that. 12 times a year makes sense. That's once a month, 12 months a year, 12 times a year. Perfect. And indeed, if you put 12.2 below the 365, you're going to get roughly every 30 days. So the industry is doing quite well. Skechers is certainly slower in collecting money than the industry. And Nike is really running behind, another pun, the group here, right? Because they're supposed to be collecting roughly every 30 days and they're waiting every 43 days. If I was the VP of Nike and I saw this, I'd get my finance team together, I'd show them this chart, and I would just tell them, just do it. That's what I would do. Okay. Ha ha ha. All right. So here is an example of the same, the analysis of receivables for 2017 LeBron James Company. They have their net credit sales here, beginning and ending accounts receivable, and they want you to compute these two ratios. It always starts with the turnover ratio, and then you can calculate the day collection period. All right. So here they had, in this case, 923,000 of credits sales, average receivables, these two numbers divided by 2, 24.9 times a year is incredible, right? It's incredible. When you divide that by 365, they're collecting their receivables basically every 2 weeks, 14.7 days. They are collecting receivable. But again, that's incredible speed, incredible agility. But what else would you expect from LeBron James? Sorry, folks. It's been a long day. Any questions?